In the early to mid-1900s, an incredible, intelligent woman was building her reputation as a teacher, a theologian, an educational author, and most importantly, a servant to God. Her efforts changed lives, but it wasn't without its own hurdles. Her past brought challenges to her, and ultimately led to her incredibly unfortunate demise. If she was alive today, she'd be an international icon, and you're about to find out why I'm saying that. Howdy all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we explore the stories of various saints throughout history, learn about what they did, and how we came to recognize them as saints today. Today, we're going to explore the life of Saint Teresa Benedicta, an incredibly intelligent person who left a legacy of love and knowledge. Teresa Benedicta was born October 12th, 1891, in Breslau, Poland. Her name at birth, and for most of her life really, was Edith Stein. She was the youngest of 11 children. Pretty big family, right? And her family was Jewish, so they were celebrating Yom Kippur when Edith was born. Her mother took this as a sign that Edith was destined for greatness, and some say it was probably her mom's favorite daughter, but parents shouldn't have favorites, so we're not going to say that. Edith's dad was a lumber merchant, but unfortunately he died when she was just under 2 years old, so she never really knew him. Edith's mom attempted to take over the business and raise her kids, all on her own, which is a very admirable undertaking, but unfortunately for her, she couldn't develop the sense of devotion to Judaism that she would have liked to see in them. As a result, Edith kind of drifted from her faith. She wasn't an atheist or anything, she just didn't actively practice any particular faith or pray like her mother did. Edith carried on living a fairly normal life for a young girl at the time. But one thing that stood out was that she got to attend college in the region. She graduated from the University of Breslau in 1911 and had a degree in German and history. And believe it or not, that was because it seemed like the most lucrative option available to her at the time. I know right now people think historians can't make a lot of money, but it was a different time. However, her true passion was actually philosophy, specifically women's rights. It's kind of interesting that she wanted to pursue philosophy since she walked away from faith and wanted to ponder like a religion-adjacent sort of concept. She joined the Prussian Association for Women's Rights to Suffocate while she was in college, and looking back on this time, she would call herself a radical feminist, but she lost interest as she matured and wanted to pursue ideas that just felt more substantial. It felt like they had more meat to them. In 1913, she went to Göttingen because she wanted to attend Edmund Husserl's lectures. She ended up becoming his student and an assistant for him, and she even earned her doctorate while studying with him. And if you're like me and have no clue who Edmund Husserl is, well, let me help. He was a fairly revolutionary philosopher and proposed a new concept of truth relating to Kantian ethics. He also established the school of phenomenology, which seeks to objectively investigate the nature of subjective, conscious experiences and world disclosure. I'm not going to go into the details because that's a little out of my ballpark, and I wanted to focus on Edith's story, not Husserl's story, because we got a lot of information to go about Edith or Teresa. Now, if you're into philosophy, I do recommend checking it out because it was very interesting to read about. It sort of focuses on how to view the world, and it's been very useful as a base for observing various studies and completing research. But yeah, back to Edith. While studying under Edmund Husserl, Edith met with Max Scheler, another philosopher. In that meeting, Max drew her attention to Catholicism, but it kind of waned after their meeting. It stirred up a little interest, but nothing super lasting. At least not then. It would be a little while before she would revisit Catholicism. She completed her basic studies in 1915, but instead of pursuing her studies further to complete her education, she wanted to help in the war effort. So, she ended up attending nursing school to serve in the Austrian military hospital. But this wasn't long-lived because the hospital closed down in 1916. So she returned to study under Husserl, and the two traveled to Freiburg and Breslau, where Edith finally graduated in 1917. And sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, I did my best. She wrote a thesis called On the Problem of Empathy and earned summa cum laude. Shortly thereafter, she witnessed somebody walking by the Frankfurt Cathedral with their shopping basket. But instead of going past, they stopped, went inside, and did a quick prayer. This was kind of new to Edith. She'd seen many people go into churches, but really only when it was a designated time or to attend service. This person just went in as if they were having a friendly conversation or a meeting and just talking to God with a prayer. Her previous interaction with Max Scheler came back to her, and it brought back some memories about Catholicism, so she started looking into it even more. It wasn't long before she had another encounter with faith, this time from an old friend. Her old friend, Adolf Reinach, had recently passed away, and Edith was paying a visit to his wife, unsure if she was really ready to deal with the grieving widow, but she knew she had to do it. However, the couple, the Reinachs, were recently converted, and Edith was surprised at just how comfortable and confident Mrs. Reinach was. The surprising meeting was the keystone to Edith's bridge of devotion. All of Edith's apathy about religion fell apart, and she said, "Christ shone forth." She also later said, "What was not in my plans was in God's plans." In 1918, just 1 year after completing her studies under Husserl, she steered down her own path with a new light to guide her. In pursuit of yet another new interest, Edith wanted to become a teacher. But it was actually impossible for women to do this at the time in that region, which is kind of crazy that she earned a doctorate, but she couldn't teach anybody. She might have been like the most qualified woman in the area, but she still couldn't be a teacher. Finally, she did find somewhere that she could apply, but she was denied because of her family's Jewish history. Feeling defeated, but not giving up hope, she returned to Breslau and wrote articles to publish while reading things like the New Testament and the Little Book of Exercises by Ignatius of Loyola. But she realized that reading just wasn't enough. She had to practice what she read, and one night was the very clear turning point for Edith. She stumbled across the autobiography of Teresa of Avila in her friend's library and started to read. She stayed up all night until she finished it, and when she finished it, she said to herself, "This is the truth." On January 1st, 1922, Edith Stein was baptized. She then went home and told her mom about what happened and that she was Catholic. They hugged each other and cried, not from sadness, but from the joy of knowing that Edith was once again close to God, though her mom was most likely hoping that it would serve as a stepping stone to come back to her faith and not stick with Catholicism, but Edith had no intention of doing that. Edith wanted to join the Carmelite order as soon as she was baptized, but she actually wasn't accepted to join. So, instead, she taught German and history at the secondary school and teacher seminary of the Dominican convent of Our Lady of Magdalene in Speyer. While there, she was asked to travel a lot and give lectures all around the region, especially on women's issues. She wrote about this pivotal period of her life, and it's a pretty provoking thought, honestly. She said, "During the period immediately before and for a long time after my conversion, I believed that leading a religious life meant renouncing all earthly things and living only in the thought of God. Gradually, however, I realized that this world demands something completely different from us. I even believe the more one feels drawn to God, the more one must come out of oneself in the sense of turning to the world to bring there a divine reason for living." So many people just tend to think that to be a religious person means you're using religion as the explanation for everything and that most science isn't applicable. But Edith demonstrated that isn't the case. While faith is the focus, you gotta realize that there's a magical beauty in even the simplest things of life that are so often overlooked, and that we're all destined for something. There's a plan for each and every one of us. In 1931, she left Speyer in search of a teaching qualification in Breslau and Freiburg, but to no avail. Instead, she focused on making her own works, dissecting the concepts of Thomas Aquinas' work, and then in 1932, she began a professorship at the Catholic institution, the Institute of Scientific Pedagogy in Munich. But sadly, this also would not last very long. As the Nazi regime rose to power in 1933, Edith could no longer be permitted to teach, but a new door was opened to her. She was finally able to join the Carmelite convent. She was overjoyed. She had already taken personal vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, it was just becoming a more formal way of life. Upon a meeting with the prioress of the Carmelite monastery in Cologne, she said, "No human activity can help us, but only the passion of Christ. My desire is to share in it." Then she went home one last time and told her mother and family, who were still in Breslau, all about her great news. She left October 12th, her birthday, and it was a little bittersweet for everybody involved, but she was very excited. She attended synagogue with her mother, and her mother couldn't help but just ask, why? Why the Catholic faith? How do you describe Christ's love to somebody who has spent their whole life just thinking he was a fraud or not the Lord? It was a question that even Edith wasn't ready to give an answer to, and I really don't know anybody who is. It's very hard to explain to somebody who has spent decades ingraining into their mind a counter idea. After a train ride from Breslau, Edith arrived at the Carmelite Monastery in Cologne on October 14th. And after 6 months there, Archabbot of Biron celebrated her investiture mass on April 14th, 1934. And from that point on, she took the name Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. So from here on out, I'm going to start calling her Teresa. 1 year later, she took her temporary vows. Then on September 14th, 1936, she renewed her vows. But on that same day, she received news that her mother had passed away. She remained at the convent, unsure of the dangers that could come if she came across the wrong group of people on her travels. Finally, on April 21st, 1938, Teresa professed her perpetual vows and stated, "From now on, my only profession will be love." But the world was about to see a very dark door be opened. On November 9th, 1938, one of the darkest periods of history showed its true colors to the world. With synagogues burning and Jewish people or converted Jewish people being targeted, the priest did all that she could to help Teresa get to safety, since her history and family heritage would make her a very primary target. On New Year's Eve 1938, Teresa crossed the border and joined the Carmelite Monastery in Aix, Holland. While at the monastery in Aix, Teresa wrote her will on June 9th, 1939. She said that she would readily accept the death God has destined for her, and she prayed for the salvation of Germany and peace for the world. She continued writing about the connections between science and religion. She was really a very prolific writer in a fairly unknown field at the time. It took 3 years, but eventually her proclamation of being ready to meet God came for her. On August 2nd, 1942, the Gestapo arrived and demanded Teresa and Sister Rosa be handed over immediately. The two knew this day was coming, and they were ready. Together, with other converted Jewish people, they were marched to the Westerbork collection camp. They were being made an example of in retaliation for the bishops of the Catholic Church of the Netherlands, who were condemning the actions of the Nazi Party. On August 7th, almost 1,000 people were sent to Auschwitz, and on August 9th, Teresa, Rosa, and almost 1,000 other people were killed in the gas chambers there. She was beatified May 1st, 1987 by Pope John Paul II, and then canonized by him October 11th, 1998. She was declared a martyr, which caused a bit of a stir if you remember when that came up for the discussion with St. Maximilian Kolbe about 15 years earlier. But it also helped that a lot of bishops were pushing for her cause, and there are a little more relaxed rules around this with the reforms on beatification for martyrs in 1983. Just a couple of months before the beatification ceremony, a miracle from Saint Teresa Benedicta was underway. Teresa Benedicta McCarthy was born, and she was named in honor of Sister Teresa. On March 20th, 1987, the young child swallowed a whole bottle of medicine that she thought was candy. Any parent's nightmare, really. She was rushed to the hospital. Her liver was swollen to more than twice the size that it should be. The doctors said that she was going to die. The only option would be an immediate transplant, but there wasn't really a surplus of 5-year-old livers to use, so the doctors couldn't really do anything. The child's parents began to pray for Sister Teresa's intercession, and they asked for friends and anybody else to help praying for their daughter. 4 days later, a doctor checking in on the child made a shocking discovery. Teresa McCarthy was totally healed, something they thought was impossible, and occurred just as impossibly quick, with no sign of permanent damage whatsoever. Saint Teresa Benedicta's feast day is August 9th, and she's the patron saint of Europe, loss of parents, converted people, and for World Youth Day. She's left behind a remarkable reputation and theological foundation for anyone who needs to see the connections faith has to science. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. So what are your thoughts of Saint Teresa Benedicta? What about her conversion story and educational career that led her to become a Carmelite nun? I hope you find her story interesting, and I look forward to learning your thoughts on her. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, and like, comment, share with your friends, or send me a suggestion on a saint to check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. If you like this episode, check back in next week. I upload every Thursday. Take care, and have a wonderful day.